Let the bell be like the voice of the Buddha, calling you back to your true home. So the meditation that we did is based on something that's called the 5 remembrances. It's something the Buddha recommended that we recite or we contemplate every day on a daily basis. Because we have a very strong habit of escaping these kind of, we think of them as unhappy ideas. And yet we know that they're true, so we avoid them constantly. And they have a lot to do with karma. So, just kind of in a different context, let me read them to you. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. I inherit the results of my actions, of body, speech, and mind. My actions are my continuation. So what's that got to do with karma? So there is a lot of, as we, when we started, Diane mentioned there's, karma is something that's talked about a lot, and kind of we sort of wonder what does it actually mean? It's being used in too many contexts, and so the word karma itself actually means action. It really means nothing else but action, but it has connotations. And often in the Buddhist context, we talk about karma hetu, karma, action as a cause, and karma phala, the fruit of the action, or the effect of the action. So their actions as a cause. I'm causing something to happen. I'm setting something in motion. And there's the result. And actually, in the yogic context, there's actually four, there's a different style of division, which is the cause, the effect, the base, and the support. So, every action has, it's not happening in a vacuum. To say that this action caused that is possibly only partially true. It may be totally untrue. Sometimes we say, you did this, we're just blaming someone else. It may not be true at all. But let's assume there's some truth to it. This person really did that. But there's more happening. There's a base, there's a sort of more, there's the fact, well, I happen not to like you, and, when you did this, it really hurt my feelings about that. It may have, not everything has to do with the actual action. It has a lot to do with what is my base consciousness, and what is society expecting. In different cultures, different things make people angry, or are considered appropriate, or make them happy even. Whereas in another culture it may be totally the wrong thing to do. So there's a base. The action is not happening in a vacuum. And then there's other actions that support. So it's never just one thing that creates something. So there's a very, very famous phrase by the Buddha, which is, this is because that is. This is not because that is not. So in Sanskrit that's called hetu pratyaya. Okay? Causes and conditions. Everything comes out of causes and conditions. Notice that they're in plural. It's not one cause and one condition, because there's always more happening. There's many things that support something. Everything supports everything else. We cannot take things and isolate them and say, this caused this. Many things caused it. But the point is to recognize that everything has food. Everything is nourished by something. This is because that is. Something happened in order to make it happen. I did not just come out and become this person. I am the result of many causes and conditions. One of them, a very central one, is that a sperm and an ovum met. Okay? And then there was causes and conditions in my mother's uterus that allowed me to be sustained there for 9 months, and then I was born, and then I was kept alive by, throughout, almost 58 years now. But there's been many causes and conditions that have created this person. I didn't come out of nowhere. None of us have. But I also did, not only did I come as a result of many ancestors, I'm also a result of cultures. I am who I am because I live in this country, in this century. I am the result of certain education. There's many causes and conditions that make me who I am. Not just my father and my mother, not just sperm and ovum or genetic code. Okay? So, who I am is dependent on many, 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 many things. And each one of us and everything that we encounter, whether it's a human being or an animal or a plant or a mineral, and maybe you have other classifications that you can see things as other things, I don't know. It's certainly possible. Perhaps an artwork is not a mineral, it's not human, it's not an animal, it's not a plant, but it's something. Even if it's not substantial, like a performance, perhaps. Everything is composed of lots and lots of things, including the consciousness of that which contributes to it. So things don't exist independently. This is what that sentence means, that very famous sentence. This is because that is. This is not because that is not. Now I know I'm sounding as if I'm trying to indoctrinate you or brainwash you into remembering this sentence, but it is a very useful thing. It's not so much that we have to commit it to memory, but we want to sort of really understand it and watch ourselves when we get off kilter. When things are right, this is because that is, well, who cares? Everything, that is all fine. So I don't care about this is because that is. But it's when things are not so comfortable, that I have to remember, maybe it's not exactly how I see it. There's many causes and conditions to what's going on. So, karma is about action, and that action has fruit. And that is kind of like the general way that we, most of the connotations about karma in culture, as well as in the East, is about this fruit. It's like and then there's a concept of merit, punya. Okay. So if I do something bad, if I do bad actions, I will reap the fruits. And then people say, well, it doesn't look like it, does it? I mean, people, there's this famous thing about how come people are doing bad actions. They're not nice people, and yet they're living in great mansions, and they seem to be bathed in whatever, and wonderful essential oils and, lotions and whatever, and they're eating wonderful food, and they live long lives, and they seem healthy. Like, it's a question like from Job. Job says, he's suffering all the time. What did I do to deserve this suffering? So then there's this thing, the laws of cause and effect are not so linear. We cannot quite see them, So now you can see how, how when it comes to these kinds of explanations, you can tell that they're not exactly logical, that there's no way to prove them. Because that's it's very equivalent to God acts in mysterious ways, because we can't explain it. So karma, cause and effect. Well, maybe in a previous life, now we've got a problem. Nobody knows what they did in a previous life. At least most of the people I know don't know what they did in their previous lives. Okay? Now, some of us may not even believe in previous lives. And it doesn't matter. Okay? And I want to state very clearly, reincarnation is something that is very strong in Buddhist cultures and can be part of Buddhist thinking. However, the Buddha himself, when asked about next lives, reincarnation, stuff of that nature, said very clearly, I do not speak about what happens after death. I only speak about suffering and the alleviation of suffering. Okay? So while there are descriptions of the Buddha's previous lives that come later, from later generations, very clearly, and it's a very common idea, reincarnation in Asia, in all of Asia, not just Indian Asia. The Buddha really did not want to get into it, because what does it matter? What does it matter what will happen to you in your next life? There's a next life at every moment. 5 minutes ago you were who you were 5 minutes ago, and now you are in another life. It looks very similar, but we'll keep changing. Every cell in our body is dying and regenerating. At every moment we have an opportunity to be someone totally different, that is connected to who we are. When you were 5 years old, you were not who you are now. So we often don't make the choice to become someone else. But we have that option at every moment. We can become free We can also become obsessed. We can become congested. We can become spacious. There's choices constantly. We're often not recognizing, because what happens is we don't see all the causes and conditions. We see just one. This causes me to get very congested, and I latch onto it, and I forget. Many causes and conditions create things, not just one. I'm isolating one cause, and therefore creating what should come out of it. But if I can open up to the fact that there's many supporting causes, there's a whole base out there, maybe that action does not have to end up where I think it is, because I'm only thinking it needs to be there. Then I'm starting to implement it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy sort of thing, when it comes to our moods. So let's look for a moment at like the traditional view of karma, and it's actually easier to take it out of, I took these out of the Yoga Sutras, so more of like a Hindu type tradition, because in the Buddhist tradition it is quite controversial, because there are so many Buddhist traditions, especially in the West, because Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism are almost kind of synonymous for many people, because of the fame of the Dalai Lama, etc. And because in Tibet there's no way to separate Buddhism from reincarnation and working towards, it's all about the process of death and being reborn in the Buddhist tradition. So in the Yoga Sutras, it's talked about that in the painful conditions, which are called kleshas, is the storehouse of karma, which brings about the seen, present, and unseen future births. Okay? So, in other words, the storehouse of karma is rooted in the kleshas, in our painful, in our unwholesome habits, okay, in our painful habitual thinking. Okay? And that these birth lifespan experiences have joy or sorrow as their fruit, depending on merit or lack of merit. Okay, so that's a very standard way of looking at it. In our congested states of mind, our painful states of mind, we create karma. And that's very important to sort of notice, that it's from congested states of mind. It's the kleshas. I'll go through that in a moment, what the kleshas are, that are creating the karma that creates future births. Okay? We can argue what future births are. Do I have to actually die and being reborn, like medically speaking, or am I being reborn at every moment? Okay, but let's just say it as a true reincarnation. And that these will have joy and sorrow as the fruit, depending on the merit or lack of merit, punya apunya. So that kind of indicates, we have to ask, what is an action that has merit? What kind of karma has merit? And what doesn't? So there's all sorts of ethical, moral considerations in that. And we may all find different answers to it. But then the concept of merit becomes very big, and then people want to accumulate merit. Because if I have enough merit at some point, is the thinking, I will have basically bought out all my bad karma, and then I get off the wheel of birth and death. Okay, samsara. Okay, so I end suffering. So that is the kind of thinking. And then often in the West, it's very interesting. Like supposedly, it is a bit supposedly. It's not exactly like that. In the East, traditionally, the idea is I want to burn off my karma or accumulate enough merit. I want to get enlightened. in order to get off the wheel of birth and death. And in the West, sometimes we translate it a little bit. I'm making a little bit of fun of it, but it's not that far off. I want to do good things. I want to accumulate merit in this life because I'm worried about my karma. That's very similar. So that in the next life I can have a larger television set or a better car. No, I'm making it a little. It's sort of extreme. But we think that if we accumulate good karma will give us better stuff in the future. Better conditions in the future. Yes, it may give us better conditions in the future. But it doesn't guarantee happiness at all. The best of conditions don't, the only condition we need is a spacious mind. You can be born in the most favorable conditions and be a very miserable person. It depends on how you treat your circumstances. In about an hour, I believe, there will be a certain person on television. They both have the same hair color, so I can't say which hair color he's going to have. But he was born with tremendous advantages, huge advantages. I mean, how many people are born with that capacity for tremendous education, tremendous financial abilities, etc. And yet you can be very miserable, and you can be very successful. This person is extremely successful by all standards of our society. He does not appear very happy to me. I can't judge because I'm not there. But, when people attack with such strongness, sorry, it's today's agenda. I say it karma, everything influences. You see, there's a base for everything. There's a culture of everything, and today's culture is obviously about the debate. So having good condition, having a better rebirth, is no guarantee of anything. It is a cause and condition. It is one cause and condition out there that can be very, very helpful. But it doesn't say you will be happy because you will be born. People have this idea, I will be born on a lotus seat. Yes, if you're born in the Pure Land, supposedly, I haven't seen the Pure Land, I don't know what it's like, but, there's this idea, it's a little bit like heaven. I can be born in this other place. So we all want to escape. What are we trying to escape? The idea of suffering. Yeah. The idea that we will get sick, that we will suffer, that we will die, that we will grow old, that we will have to be separated from that we love, whether it's people or things or ideas. We don't want to deal with it. We just sort of lock it away. So what are these painful states of mind, these kleshas? So they're defined as, the first one, the fountainhead of the kleshas is avidya, ignorance. What are we ignorant of? So, in the Yoga Sutras, it's a little different than in a Buddhist context. In the Buddhist context, we say that our ignorance is we think that we are this solid block, or that everything exists on its own. We don't see that everything is constantly changing, constantly being made up of other elements. So we don't see that I am actually not me. Of course I am me at the same time, but I'm also made of so many elements, like my parents, my grandparents, etc., my culture, the people I meet, the actions of other people that influence me, etc., etc. Everything is made of so many things, and my own existence is dependent on things that surely don't look like me, like the sun, like the air. Well, without air, I don't exist. Without the sun, none of us exist. Without rain, even in this summer's drought, we have, without water, we cannot exist. Without the earth, we cannot exist. Without the food that we eat, we don't exist. And the food that we eat depends on lots and lots and lots of conditions, including many, many people who created that food. Okay? Even if you grow your own food, there's still seed companies, etc. So we're related we're dependent on so many things that we just don't see. So inside me, there is the shipping guy at Fedco Seed Company, and there's the compost people, and let alone the Trader Joe's people and wherever else I shop, and the electricity people, because that's how I cook my food. So there's just so many things that people that I've never met, I don't know who they are, and yet they are part of me. I cannot be separated from them. But when we normally look at a person, we say, you're you, and this is it. And we don't see. So this is being ignorant. And we think that you are like you are, and you're not changing, sort of thing. So of course we know that's not true, but at the same time we have a habit to think that way. And this is why it's very hard for us to forgive people. Because, well, you did this thing, and you're a jerk, and you're not going to change, because I've already classified you. And actually, looking at this election cycle, we see that very strongly culturally. We see how strong that is. We see how strongly people dig their heels, which of course I just did also. I'm not different. And we see how unforgiving people are about, were these emails deleted or not? And how we're so quick to classify. And we latch onto this very, very strongly. And we all do this. No matter which side we're on, we choose the side we want to latch stuff onto. Because that's the habit, that's ignorance. And none of us are kind of safe from this ignorance. And in the yoga traditions, there's another thing that's called asmita, meaning thinking, I am this, which is basically the same thing. They're just separated. And then there's, but in the Buddhist tradition, there's three things. We call it ignorance, and as a result of ignorance, because I think I am this and I want to protect myself. So I have what's called desires and aversions. Okay? So attraction or aversion. I'm attracted to this and I want it and I want to grab it or I want to push away what I'm afraid I don't like. Okay? And so those are the three. In the yoga tradition there's also this identification with self, which is really the same as ignorance. And there's also the fear of death, the clinging onto life, which again is the same thing. So they're just expanding it. But those are the three main states. The ignorance, in other words, thinking, latching onto things, and attraction and aversion, or desire and aversion. Okay? Those are the three painful states. If I come out of a painful state of that, like that, and anybody here doesn't have them, we have them constantly. Okay, so the trick is going to be not having those states, but knowing how to release them. Like recognizing, whoops, I just got huge desire. Or I just got huge repulsion. Or I just classified something. And then release it. And the quicker we release it, the better off we are. But it's these states of mind that create karma. Karma is action. There is no escape of action. What do you want to do? Not do anything? It's just not possible. No matter what you do, you're doing something. By your non-action, we all know this phrase, by omission or commission. So, you can by omission create karma also, because you didn't do the so-called right thing, whatever that might be. So, if we're using karma in a moralistic sort of way, no matter what you do, you're quote-unquote screwed. You can't escape. And yet the whole teachings of karma is about how do we get off suffering. Karma is not like any other teaching. Just like I don't exist as a clear entity, I keep changing. You can't say Avi is this and only this and not that. because I'm keep changing and I'm all composed of so many things. The same thing about any quote-unquote dogma, any idea that we're teaching. Karma is just something that's meant to help us. The ideas about karma, they're meant to help us liberate ourselves. Okay? They're not meant to describe the world as it 100% is. There is karma and there are consequences, and that's exactly how it is. It's a general description that allows us to break through our suffering. That's what it's meant to be. So in the same way that nothing can be separated from anything else. Karma hetu, karma cause, the action, and karma phala, the results, cannot be separated. So that means that I understand that an action that is the cause of something was also the result of something else. Okay, so it's a constant cycle. You know, I say this action is the cause and this action, the one in the future, is the result. But the action that was the cause, you know, say you met someone and, I don't know, you gave them the finger. You know, that made them upset. That was the result. You know, simple stuff that happens on a regular basis. We do this, you know, maybe not literally because it's not nice, but we act, you know, that way. We're acting dismissively towards people sometimes. I acted dismissively because of some other action. That was a result. So it's like you know what? Nothing is the true cause of anything, but everything contributes. And that's what we need to look at, the fact that things contribute. So that's why we want to be careful. So in the idea of karma, yes, there is this idea, I have to take responsibility for my actions. I have to be aware of my actions. I have to be aware of my motivations. But there's also this understanding that within taking responsibility for my action, I am not the only cause and condition for what transpired at the end. So it's this weird balance. I am taking responsibility for my actions. I cannot fully take responsibility for the fruit of the action, because there's many other things that came into it. And the reason why this is helpful, because this all has to do with, is it going to be helpful for me to become more spacious in my mind, to be less angry, to be less sad, to be less suffer less. Okay. So many of us know these feelings of guilt, for example. That's not a very nice state of mind. And I think I am responsible. But if I understand I am responsible, and yet many other things are responsible, not just me. I'm one of many causes and conditions. This is especially true with children, with our children. You know, sometimes we think, I have to create this for my child. And circumstances can be very desperate sometimes. You know, or they seem very desperate. So then the parent, as a parent, we get very, I have to protect, I have to interfere, I have to make sure. And we have to somehow, we have to do the best we can. We have to really put our best actions, because our actions have consequences, especially with children, where we have a huge influence. And yet to also accept that there is other influences, that my actions may not be able to stop. So finding that balance between, yes, I'm fully responsible for my actions, and be fully committed to doing the actions that I think are worthy in this world. Not to accumulate merit, but simply because that's what's the right action for me to do. And at the same time to accept that I cannot be attached to the results. So, and that's where it's very different from politics. It's like, how can I act in the world with the fullest integrity I have, with the greatest intention to be spacious and yet accept that it may not help. The world may still, I can do what I can with the greatest intentions to reverse global warming, let's say, and the world may still come to an end. And can I still do everything I can to promote what I think is worthy in this world, and also accept that it may not work? It's very difficult in a way, because we're so used to, I want to have an action and I want the results and I want them attributed to me. It's kind of funny. It's like we have these lofty ideas that are very global and yet we are responsible. So finding that balance in action and making sure that the intention of my action comes from a spacious mind. That my action is not coming out of fear, in the three kleshas, that the ignorance, the attachment, the desires, or the repulsion or the aversion. I'm not acting out of those. That's when action, the actual karma, the actual action, does not carry with it bad merit. It doesn't carry bad karma, because it all depends on the intention. The results may still not be fabulous. Okay? So, it's like, as we know, many very righteous, very wonderful people have tried to stop, situations like Hitler, Stalin, Mao, etc. And yet millions and millions of people were killed. That the person who is acting out of a spacious mind, they did not create that karma. They're contributing to some extent, yes, but because what happens is, if I'm acting out of a spacious mind, at that moment, I basically got off the wheel of suffering. I'm still born, and I will still die. But at that moment when I let go of my ignorance, my attachments, and my aversions, and I see through, and I really understand that things keep changing, and that things are composed of everything else, the moment I'm not trying to protect myself, because I can see that, I'm impermanent. I will die. I will get sick. I will get old. I don't need to protect myself. It's okay. Because I will continue in different forms. I'm constantly continuing. Okay? Whether in this form, which we recognize as this life, or in other forms. And it has nothing to do with future lives. It has to do with, because every action continues. The actions of each one of us, the kindness we display to people continues. The education we offer to people continues. How we influence people, whether we smile or whether we're grumpy, this continues. Now, it may not feel like it continues, in 500 years, but it does, because it keeps cycling in different ways. So the moment I recognize that it's not about me protecting myself, protecting my nervous system from not feeling the zings of suffering, and just saying it's just the nervous system, it's just what it does when things are uncomfortable. And not getting all excited every time there's unpleasantness. The nervous system loves to do that. It loves to latch on and amplify unpleasant things. And I'm not desiring, and I'm not pushing anything away, and I'm recognizing everything comes from everything else. At that moment, I got off the wheel of birth and death, the wheel of suffering. I'm still fully alive, But I got off because I'm not caught in these ideas of birth and death and protect this body, protect this entity. Don't let me suffer. At that moment, if I'm just totally open, I'm no longer in that strange wheel of constantly, So samsara, the wheel of birth and death, is not just the wheel of being reborn in the next life, it's being reborn in the next moment into suffering. I broke that cycle. For a second, maybe. And then, knowing me, and there's a fairly good chance that most of you are similar to me, we break it for a second and the habit of congestion comes back and we latch on. Like, well, that was really cool. That was a very nice experience. This experience of generosity was very nice, let's say. We all know that. You're being generous and it's lovely. You feel good, and not because anybody thanked you or anything, but because it was just a very nice, heart-opening thing to do. And 3 minutes later, you're like grabbing something. You're latching onto something. And if the experience of generosity was good enough, you may latch without too much greed. But you still latched. So it's this constant training the mind to recognize my greed, my fears, how I'm trying to protect an entity that in some strange way actually isn't what I think it is. I think I am this person. And yet I'm really the result of so many, I'm everything else besides being me. So I'm trying to protect something that in some weird way really does not exist. It only exists in my imagination. Of course I'm very, I can touch myself, I'm very real. But I'm not the thing that I think I am. So the moment I can open up to things like pain, I can also open up to joy. Because joy, it's not that they're opposite, but because to open up is to open up to everything, not selectively. So if I can have a spacious mind, at that moment, I broke the cycle of birth and death. So the issue in karma is this action taken out of my suffering? Am I suffering? And am I trying to break my suffering? Or, we all suffer. I could be suffering. So I'm suffering, and then I'm stopping, calming my mind, coming to terms with my suffering, creating a space within myself, and whatever action I take then will produce very different karma. So it's a question of can I stop karma by basically calming the mind, calming the habits of the mind. Buddhist meditation is supposed to be composed of two things. Shamatha, which is calming, stopping. It isn't to stop the mind, because to stop the mind is like stopping a clock. It's not like blank mind. It's to stop the habits of the mind. The mind runs after things constantly. Okay, so we're always trying to, grab something that we think is pleasant. That's a habit. And then the second, so calming, stopping calming the mind. And then the second component that we hope comes naturally is vipassana, looking deeply, observing things as they really are. So if I calm the grabbing mind, the running after things, the trying to protect myself constantly, then maybe I can see things as they really are. And then I can see, this pain that I'm so fearful of, I'm trying to avoid constantly, or this thing that I think will make me happy, that actually may not. They may not be what they are. I may not be happy from this thing. You know, that chocolate cake may not make me happy. It may actually give me a tummy ache. And that thing that I'm trying to avoid may actually be a wonderful thing for me, or it may not, but can I accept? Can I open up to everything as it is, rather than latch onto my pain, latch onto my fears, latch onto my jealousies, to my sadness? And of course with physical pain, it's very, you know, this is where the work of meditation is often very useful for people, because when we have physical pain, we can open the mind a little bit. The pain tends to subside. It's not always 100% true, but it has a chance. So, just want to make sure I have some notes. I want to make sure I went through them. Yeah. The main thing is in karma, because everything creates karma. In the Buddhist understanding is that the motivation. What is the motivation behind it? Does it come from trying to protect myself? Or does it come from a spacious mind that sees that everything interrelates and is willing to let go of ideas? Am I willing to let go of my fear of pain, of my fear of death, my fear of sickness, my fear of not having enough? You know, the various things. And we all have slightly different variations on the same thing. But we all know what things kind of tend to control things in our lives. And can we open up and accept? Well, maybe I will become a street person. And I will not have a home, and I will be very poor, and maybe not have enough food. I mean, let's be honest. You know, that describes possibly 90% of the humans who've lived on this planet. Does that mean that all those people were miserable and horrible? Not necessarily. It depends on my state of mind. I'm not necessarily wishing for anybody to go through that. But I'm just saying, if I can open myself up to it, then my actions are not all derived around, I gotta keep this house, and I gotta make more money, and I gotta get a better house, etc. And I'm not saying that losing a house is not a difficulty. It is. But then, what do I do if I lose things? It's not that I have to go seek it. You know, it's not that I have to go starve myself in order to not have attachment to food. Although that's something that people often try, not very successfully in my experience. You know, you recognize that you can do. Most of us recognize, well, I'm good without food for a certain period of time, maybe a few days or whatever. I'm good with this diet for a few weeks, and then you know how diets are. The 3-week diet, I did great on it for 3 weeks, and boy, the 4th week came and I just grabbed everything in sight. I've done one of those. You know, these health diets, you know, this is very good for you, you will feel really good. It's a 30-day diet, and what do you know, on day 31, you acted so good, and on day 31, all you want is like ice cream or whatever it is that's not allowed in the diet, and you want that. And you thought that you would do exactly what the book said. You will be able to introduce things moderately. Well, it all happened in 5 minutes. And I know I'm not the only one, because everybody says that. It's a well-known thing. And of course, nobody in the book talks about it. You know, we're constantly in denial. We're in denial of the fact that we are all dying. We're all getting old. Even Jane Fonda. She doesn't look it, but and to embrace it. Embrace what's unpleasant for us, then it becomes so much more pleasant. And then the issue of karma is kind of non-existent. If I can embrace it, and I can still create karma I may feel like I'm, but as long as I'm also, my motivations are to create joy, love, equanimity, then I'm good. Okay. So love, compassion, joy, and equanimity are kind of like these are considered the four abodes of the spacious mind. They're called the four Brahma Viharas. Okay. These kind of save you every time, and thankfully there's only 4 of them, so you can always say to yourself, love, compassion, joy, equanimity. It's kind of easy, and you can ask yourself, am I in that state? Or am I in one of the opposite states? And they're all the same. Love, compassion are very clearly, to love someone is to not want anything bad to happen to them. Compassion is to want to avoid them experiencing bad things, so they're really the same coin, different sides of the same coin. And equanimity is seeing things, it's not just being equanimous, it's not just being easeful about things, it's seeing things from a higher level so that we're not latching onto one thing. Okay? Which is what often prevents us from loving someone. We don't see them for all that they are, we just see them for the things that we don't like about them. So we dislike them. And joy is really, we're not talking about the joy of going to a party and getting high on whatever, but the joy of being spacious, of being, that everything is fine, that things are okay, and wanting that for other people, having joy in the joy of others. So joy, love, compassion, equanimity are kind of different aspects of something very similar, which is when we've stopped latching on. When we find some freedom. It's what I call the spacious mind. So we have these great 4 Brahma Viharas, which sort of a guide into how to not create karma, how to get off the wheel. But in order to do that, we have to keep providing the space, to open up the space, to calm and stop the mind. Stop the habits, calm the mind. That is always, always, always going to be the first step. Because when the mind is like, it's very hard to say, is this compassionate? No, it's not. Well, I don't care. It's like, how often do we know that we're not being compassionate? Often. But we're stuck in somewhere else. So I got to stop the mind, and that's why we sit. That's what Buddhist meditation is about. To train myself to stop and calm the mind, so I can occupy a space of love, of compassion, of joy, of equanimity. Because if I don't stop the mind on a regular basis, I don't have the habit. It's like in my bank account, I don't have enough reservoirs in me. So that's why I have to constantly, calming, stopping, opening, ask myself, what's happening? Am I aware of what I'm doing? Or am I being pushed by my desires, by my fears? Fear and aversion are basically the same, different word for the same thing. Am I pushing away discomfort? Am I pushing away the notion of death or sickness or old age? Or being separated from what I love? What I love may be my car, maybe my children, maybe my parents, maybe my pets, or my PhD or my job. And am I trying to avoid being separated from something? So looking at these 5 remembrances on a regular basis, we have practices that are meant to help us. So karma is just a concept. It's not some absolute truth. It's not build up your good karma and go cash out your bank account at the end of life and be reborn in the Pure Land on some rose flower. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what happens after this life. You know, the actual one of death. Because no one comes back and tells you. I mean, you know, there's just no... And even if they told me, you know, I mean, well, there's some Tibetans, for example, who claim, and you go, okay, that's cute, but it's still, I can't, you know, it doesn't hit a place, you can have faith in it, but you can't know it for sure. Now, it may be true or not, and it doesn't really matter. I'm not trying to argue one way or the other. Just trying to say that my karma affects me constantly. And the way to undo that and just dwell in a spacious mind is to just stop and calm the mind, become aware of my ignorance, of my attachments and my aversions. To understand that this is because that is, to keep asking myself, what is this, you know, what's going on now and what are the causes and conditions that made it and what am I contributing in the causes and conditions? And am I doing it for the benefit of beings in general, of the world in general? Am I doing it for the benefit of what I think will protect myself? If I can let go of trying to protect myself, it sounds so simple. And it really isn't, because we're so ingrained. But if I can let go, karma is not an issue anymore. I don't have to worry about future births, nothing. Because I'm off the wheel. I got off the wheel of birth and death. Because I have a spacious mind. So what I'd like to do, there's this idea of, I just want to find the page that it's on, sorry. I'm not very good at marking pages. There's this idea that we can get off the wheel of birth and death, and that there are people who have done that, and yet they come back. So in the Buddhist world, they're called bodhisattvas. Okay, so bodhisattva often is considered to be one who, well, they're said to be riding the waves of birth and death. They choose, like, they could have gotten off, as if there's a literal thing, you know. They could have gotten off and become fully enlightened and never come back. But they choose to come back to help all other beings reach the shore of liberation. So I just want to invoke, you know, to recite the names of these bodhisattvas, or some of them, and look at how does a bodhisattva, one who rides the waves of birth and death without attachment, without ignorance, who are they? What do they do? So it just gives us inspiration to sort of look at another way of getting off the wheel of suffering. We invoke your name, Avalokiteshvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your name in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying, and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering in the other person. We invoke your name, Manjushri. We aspire to learn your way, which is to be still and to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will look without judging or reacting. We will look deeply so that we will be able to see and understand the roots of suffering, the impermanent and selfless nature of all that is. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding to cut through the bonds of suffering, thus freeing ourselves and other species. We invoke your name, Samantabhadra. We aspire to practice your vow, to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning, and to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to others. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species. These are great aspirations. So, we do our best at each moment to become more like that. To become more compassionate, more understanding. And little by little, we train ourselves to be that. And maybe one day we become Guan Yin, Avalokiteshvara. Maybe one day we become a Buddha. And if not, no big deal. It's okay. No, it's because it's not about the ambition. It's about an aspiration. So it's a little different than desire. And because as I practice, trying to become more spacious, more compassionate, more understanding, it's very pleasant. So I'm gaining. I may not be Avalokiteshvara, even though my name is Avi, so it's a teeny bit similar, maybe I have a chance. But it's really about the practice. The constant practice, the constant awareness. Avalokiteshvara is not naturally we think, Avalokiteshvara just naturally is compassionate, just naturally listens to the cries of the world. If you think don't you think Mother Teresa, who is like a little bit of a modern era, supposed to be, Bodhisattva of compassion? I am sure she had her moments of anger and stiffness and uptightness. So now that she's a saint, everything's fine. She is totally beyond. But when she was alive, maybe not, right? So we're all like that. We're all just moving towards a direction. So we encourage ourselves and do the best we can. Thank you for coming. Don't let the debate debase you. I know it's hard. But how can we apply this even to things I fall into this. It's very hard. I know I fall into it when I just did also. Sorry?
I said, you don't watch it. You just sit down and watch.
Yeah, they're really going to tell you about it anyway.
Yeah.
So let's listen to 3 sounds of the bell. Allowing ourselves to come back home. Allowing the spacious mind to reside within us.